The great Trump 2025 buyout of federal employees and what is very likely coming next. That is the topic of today's podcast. Hello, I'm attorney Morris E. Fisher, and today I want to discuss not only the recent developments that we've all seen in the news from the Trump administration that significantly have impacted federal agencies and federal employees, but also the likelihood of what's coming next. And I'm even going to start with that because it's kind of fascinating. So as people understand, there's the federal buyout, and that was offered with the 8 months of pay, either administrative leave or actually keeping your job or restructuring the job, but the job was going to end. And at the end of the day, 65,000 people have already taken the packages. What is coming next? I can tell you I have heard from the inside because this has come up in at least one of my cases where I spoke to a federal manager of a particular agency who informed me that at his agency, there was an internal email. It was sent out to all the employees, and it basically said that if you don't accept this buyout, there's no guarantee that your job is going to be safe. And in fact, what's going to happen here is there's going to be some sort of DOGE efficiency committee group. It's going to come to the federal agency. It's going to start looking at each particular job and whether that job is expendable or necessary. He said, this federal manager, that in his component alone, and this is really fascinating because he says that everyone was teleworking, but now everyone has to be back at the physical office, and there's 20 people at his location in his component, and there's only 8 workstations. Okay, so what do these other 12 people practically do? Now, this is important because think about how the Trump administration doesn't see this as a problem, or certainly a long-term problem. And to the extent that they see this as any sort of problem, how are they going to fix this situation? Do you think that the way that the Trump administration is going to fix this situation is going to be by creating more workspaces? I don't think so. I don't think many of you think so. I think what's going to happen is they're going to eliminate many of these jobs. There was a report out there of another agency that's already interviewing a number of federal employees, and it was basically a kid in his 20s going through the traditional, like, what is it that you do here type of thing. I think each employee got about 15 minutes to explain what they do, why his or her job is necessary. And, the kid took down some sort of notes, whatever the story is. I mean, assuming each employee very articulate, in a very articulate manner, which is not so simple for federal employment. I mean, most people in general have a pretty challenging time explaining their jobs and breaking it down to the simpleton. Okay, not to federal managers or anything like that. Just if you were explaining your job to a teenager, how would you explain your job? That's what you should be doing, as basic as it gets. But ultimately, the question would be, would it really matter? Does it matter? Because it seems like the administration is just taking a wrecking ball to these jobs, and they're determined to cut a number of these positions. Now, it is interesting because thus far, what we have seen already is we've seen a number of agencies that have been hit hard by this, and some of them arguably are for political reasons, such as the CIA workforce buyouts, where the Central Intelligence Agency has offered buyouts to the entire workforce, aiming to realign with the administration's priorities. We have, of course, the FBI personnel changes, an ongoing effort to potentially terminate numerous FBI agents involved in the investigations targeting President Trump and his supporters. Okay, that's not the product of efficiency. Okay, that's something else. We also have the Schedule F reclassification, where new guidelines suggest that a wide range of federal employees will lose their employment protections under the administration's new Schedule F. And things like the Merit Systems Protection Board are not going to apply to them, and other protections won't either. What we do suggest is, as you're going through this process, you're going to want to document everything that you can. You want to maintain records of communications, directives, any changes to your employment status, conditions, duties, responsibilities. Also, if you are offered any sort of agreement, you're going to want to consult with an experienced attorney to understand the implications fully. Obviously, as I make this video on February 10th, a little past 11 a.m., if you're offered anything and the deadline is today, I mean, there's no way my office, or I would think many offices, could accommodate that type of deadline of this afternoon. So really, this is after February 10th. If you're offered anything, you're going to want to consult with an attorney about it. Now, just a word about our law firm. As all of this is going on with the buyouts and President Trump and the Trump administration and federal employment wrecking crews, we are still going on with our MSPB and EEO cases and other cases against the government. And I'm happy to report that a few days ago, I received a decision on an MSPB petition for review in my client's favor. It remanded an AJ decision dismissing a case nigh against the Department of Agriculture, DC-1221-20-0594W1. This was a perceived whistleblower case. My client got a suspension for allegedly lack of candor. And all of these things now, suspensions, reprimands, bad reviews, not as good a review as someone else got, they're all very important now, because if the rosters have to be trimmed, so to speak, and this is what this, not just this federal manager, but I have friends with some others, is that they're going to be looking at personnel files. Absolutely. They're going to be looking at who's got the best performance ratings. If you have something like a suspension in your file going through this process, this is not going to be a good thing. And certainly if it's the product of whistleblower, you can, as of February 10th, 2025, you can bring a case on that, assuming the case has merit. It goes through the OSC first, then it goes through the MSPB. And just getting back to this particular case, basically the supervisor assaulted my client. Okay, this is what happens here. And my client reports it to the agency's special police force. And rather than investigating the supervisor, they put my client through a series of these investigative interviews, like, can you please tell the same story 4 or 5 different times? And inevitably, they will find some inconsistencies with that story. And they never actually interview the supervisor. And my client gets this 2-week suspension. And the AJ dismisses this case because she allegedly, quote, failed to describe the precise nature of the whistleblower claims raised in her OSC complaint, and also didn't submit a sworn statement to the MSPB. I mean, none of this is true. I mean, and that's why the thing gets remanded, basically, is that Every pleading, for example, that you're filing with the MSPB, it's all done on a portal. And the portal all asks you at every pleading that you file, do you attest to what you're filing under penalties of perjury? And everyone has to say yes in order for the thing to get filed. So, I don't know. I've had one at the beginning of, or I'd say the middle of 2024. It was a dismissal, shouldn't have been dismissed. That's on our website. It was another one of these nonsensical administrative judge dismissals. It turns out, I think that judge went into retirement. This might have been his last decision, that, he didn't really do that well. But at the end of the day, if you have something like this on your record and you're facing a system of people who aren't really doing their jobs well, okay, you can get caught in this. And these are the kinds of grounds that are going to be looked to in eliminating federal jobs. And you need an aggressive attorney, someone who's experienced, who can handle these appeals. Otherwise, you're going to be at a big disadvantage. One other word about our law firm: unlike large law firms, your case will not be pawned off to an associate right out of law school who's learning this area on your dime. We have a small staff here of very knowledgeable and experienced professionals. Remember, anything you should sign, you want an attorney to review it so your rights are protected. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember that you don't have to face these challenges alone. Call us. We're here to help.